Hello, great ones. Welcome to the relaunching of my YouTube channel. I just completed season 1 during the whole pandemic of the Living Me Great podcast, and I am transferring all the episodes over to my YouTube so that my new YouTube audience gets a dose of what my content is about. Please like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy the show. Hello, great ones. Welcome to the Live and Be Great podcast. I'm your host, Latonya Sampson-McDonald. I am a life coach and a registered marriage and family therapist associate. And this podcast was created to motivate, educate, and inspire all to live and be great. On today's episode, I want to share the second portion of the series that I was a part of called Black Therapists Speak, that was hosted by a Canadian therapist named Miss Kimberly Cato, who has a foundation called True Roots. And this second portion, we continue the presentation on childhood trauma that was presented by another Canadian therapist named Miss Tracy A. Thomas. Again, I will be leaving the YouTube link so you can see the full presentation and the full show, if you can, in its entirety in the description of the podcast. Also, please, if you haven't heard the first part, definitely go back to the previous episode, or you can still just click on the link to see the full presentation. Enjoy.
The children that I started out my practice with.
Right.
Right.
And it's basically, I think what you're speaking towards is, I call it adults in their second teenagehood or their second adolescence. And you're dealing with them and they feel that their behavior is normalized, it's acceptable. But hey, Tracy, hey, Kimberly, hey, Latonya, why are you calling me out on this? This is how I function. This is how I move. This is what I do. This is what's gotten me here to you. Even though I'm broken, this is me. Like, why are you calling me out on that? Yeah. Like, you're Black, you should know. What is it? Is it your education that's making you judge me right now?
Yeah.
And you have to speak to that and say, no, it's not right. You don't have equilibrium. This is why I'm telling you, you need to rest and digest. This is why I'm telling you, you need to not be reactive and be responsive. Because if you're not responsive, how are you effectively dealing with your issues? You're not. You're sticking several Band-Aids on top of an issue that's already going to implode.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well said. Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that is really hard to talk about is the fact that protesting, and I'm really glad that Latonya brought it up earlier, and the fact that children sometimes understand and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But how do you get your voice heard if you don't understand the well-rounded message of what's happening?
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts, Latonya, on what we've talked about so far, and the fact that you've seen and been a part of some of the protests and been around the culture? We have it here in Canadian society, but not to the magnitude that it is in the American fiber right now. So how would you speak to that?
I speak to it as, I would say there is healing and validation, right? I think that's the main point about the protest, and learning to find the healing, right? But there's also another side. Okay, yes, we may have people who come from the oppressive nature, starting to wake up and fight with us. But there's also a piece that Black people are used to collecting scraps. You see what I'm saying? And just dealing with it, you know, based off of what you're talking about, like the putting several band-aids on it, right? We're used to that and we've normalized that. So you're telling me I could have had something different, or I can have something different? That might even be traumatizing to somebody. Like, I've been doing it this way this whole entire time. I think that's where we're going with that. And I know you guys mentioned earlier about how they like to use black on black crime. And even got us using that. Like, even us, like, even in rap songs, people saying, you know, they don't care about Black Lives Mattering until they matter to you. But what we're losing is a human knows that they're being treated differently based off of being able to see somebody else being treated differently. So that's where the dig, that's how we notice racism and discrimination, is because we see that you're capable of giving somebody else that doesn't have the look that I have, or the education or the class that I have, better than you treat me. Yet you want us to continue to be silent about it, right? Also, when looking at your PowerPoint, Tracy, and we're talking about the childhood, I want people to understand that just because we're talking about the childhood doesn't mean that we're discrediting that you're an adult now. No, we want that inner child of you to be heard and to be understood, and for you to connect it back. Take your, you know, you're adult, you're a parent, take that out of the equation and really look at all the stuff that you had to suppress, that you had to ignore, that you had to push through, that you never got healed. Right? And I always think about the fact that our children are a manifestation of our unresolved issues. We're not just talking about the child you have, but you, even as a parent, you as an adult, you're a manifestation of your parents' unresolved issues. Right? So it's okay to have some healing. But the protests, they're a cry, but it's and the looting, I think that was like a big that caused a divide between, like, kind of Black people saying, okay, at least I ain't doing that, right? Or I'm okay with the peaceful protest. And you'll see Black people get pissed off, like, why are you looting? Now they're going to think of us. And we've had to live our lives like, okay, what are white people going to think of us if we do this? Our whole lives we've had to do that. So what if somebody says, I'm tired of this? And America, they place materials over Black bodies, right? The value of this. And okay, so they robbing the Gucci store, they robbing Target. Okay, these people got insurance, right? And the whole economy and all these big name corporations that have generational wealth, they're built off of Black people's backs. And America hasn't seen even a minuscule amount of how vengeful we deserve to be and have the right to be. So when we allow them to reduce it back to, okay, make sure you protest peacefully, don't loot, or they'll lose the message, I think we discredit that emotion, that anger, that trauma, and that pain that we have endured, you know, as Black people. And even though I'm not American, I've lived my life as one because I've been treated. Nobody's going to ask me, are you Canadian? Nobody's going to ask me, are you Guyanese? No, you look the part, so I'm going to treat you as the part. And I think we all have been fighting to not look dangerous since we were like 5 years old. Right? People will already treat you like you are a threat to them without you even being able to step into your full humanity yet and understand that. So I think it's definitely powerful, the protests and people speaking out and us normalizing pain for Black people. Like, not normalizing that it should be done, but normalizing us saying, this hurts. This hurts and I want it to stop. Right? So I think that part is powerful in this presentation. And that is my experience watching the protest. I don't want to, talk about Black on Black crime. I just don't. I do. I want to talk about it in-house, right? Because I understand why it exists, but you're not going to use that to discredit the fact that I've been treated as less than since birth.
Yeah.
Right? You've made that my birthright, and I didn't ask for it, and it is unfair.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm coming from, that standpoint. And I think also people forget that Black people are fighting multiple wars.
Yeah.
Multiple wars. You can be fighting. People think you just gotta fight one. Okay, let's just fight racism. Oh, let's just fight Black on Black. No, let's just fight the violence between Black women and Black men. No, but between mother and daughter and father and son. No, we are fighting multiple wars.
Yeah.
We got to deal with regular human trauma and be Black on top of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is my take on my experience here and watching the protest, and how I'm viewing it, and how I'm starting to gear my approach when I have my clients and when I have these conversations with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the distinction you made about conversations that we have amongst ourselves and conversations that we have in the broader context. And it's true, when we talk in-house, there's a different conversation, and it does need to stay in-house. And then that conversation for the broader community, is different. We have issues that we need to address in and amongst ourselves, and which is part of the reason why I, in addition to doing Black Therapists Speak, but I needed to have a forum for us to have those conversations just amongst us, so that we can understand where we're coming from, and then have that broader conversation from a unified voice. This is where we are. This is what we're saying. This is what we need. This is what we want. But I do think part of the healing comes from us unifying together privately, and then coming out publicly. In terms of the protests and the distinction between protesting and looting and all of it just becomes such a distraction, and which I find frustrating, because the message is simple. Right? Equality for all, justice for all. Like the system of white supremacy must be obliterated, period, full stop. And but that is not a situation or system that yields gently or quietly. Right? And so you get all sorts of things being thrown out. No, don't look here. Look over there. Look over there. Look over there. Look at that. What about that? And just so that you don't go anywhere near the actual issue. And so I think we really do need to be mindful and remain focused on the actual issue, and then just fling off all the things that it's tossing out as the distraction. But I think as you get closer to the real issue, the distraction, it becomes frantic. Look with its head cut off. It's running frantically. And that frantic nature is kind of what I see in much of the conversation around the protests.
Right. But also, too, one of the things I want to point out is the intersectionalities, which the two of you have loosely spoke about in both of your responses to the question. And the fact is the intersectionalities when it comes to the chaos, the intersectionalities where you're fighting multiple wars or multiple problems or embedded problems or systematic trauma, right? Or severs within the community. So you're dealing with these multitudes on top of a systemic issue or problem or a family decline or a societal decline. And then you have to balance, you don't have an ability to balance yourself.
Yeah.
You don't have an ability to see yourself through because, hey, you weren't taught to see yourself through. You were taught to react.
Mm-hmm.
You're taught to react to an issue. You're taught to, if this happens, I do this.
Yes.
If that happens, I do that. If this happens, I do this, and I'm okay with that because it's just about getting your footing. It's not about having on both shoes.
Yes.
And that's the primary response that we need to amend is having on both shoes, being well equipped.
Yeah.
Understanding what our rights are, understanding that you don't have to live in a state of chaos.
Yes.
Yeah, you may have grown up in that chaos, but that chaos does not serve you.
Yeah.
So getting back to that healing capacity, getting back to the mindfulness. A lot of what I do in my private practice is a lot of healing and breathing techniques. What people don't realize is when you are in a state of decline or a state of trauma or inflicted issues of anger or pain, you breathe very shallowly. And imagine breathing shallowly and dealing with constant trauma or panic.
Yeah.
So teaching people basically how to breathe properly, how to take air in instead of just using it, like to actually make your body feel better.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when they do breathing, just a basic assessment of how somebody breathes, they're very shocked on how shallow they breathe.
Yeah.
They're very shocked on the fact that their body's not getting the oxygen that they need. One of the signs that I can always tell is we do a breathing activity and they become very lightheaded. And I said, well, that's because you don't breathe properly. You're always breathing in a state of panic.
Yeah.
Right? This is the reason why you feel that way. This is the reason why you feel like you have to run. This is the reason why you yell. This is a reason why you feel like, hey, if my child's not going to act right, I'm going to hit them, because you're in that state of flight.
Yes.
And you have to get out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So these are all big things that we don't see because they're not taught to us, but they're taught to our counterparts in different communities. We have to bring those things come from our culture. Those things come from those things come from Afro culture. Those things come from Aboriginal culture. But they were then they were then whitewashed and made into tools. We have to get back to our principles of healing to keep our own.
Excellent. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So my final thought is just the fact that I want parents to be mindful. I want youth to be mindful. What are you guys sharing on social media? What are you guys looking at on your TV? What are you looking at when you decide to open your laptop or press the open button on your screen on your smartphone? Don't replay the trauma. You don't understand what it's doing to you. It's good to know about the event that's happened, but when you watch these internet fights, when you watch the killings over and over again, it's causing a cellular decline. This is big. We need to talk about this because it's not affecting you like it's affecting your non-color friend. Yeah, your Hispanic friend, it may be affecting them. Your Aboriginal friend, it may be affecting them in the same way because they understand what oppression is. But when you're watching this outside of our circles and you're the only person in that room that's of color, you're inflicting another sense of trauma onto yourself that you don't understand. You become farther a part of the margin than you don't even realize. And these are things that we need to talk about. These are things that we need to address. It's an overexposure to violence, and we really need to address it. We really need to take it out of our system that, hey, I'm fine seeing George Floyd murder shown 100 times on Facebook or IG or Snapchat. I'm okay with that. No, you're not okay with that because you're up thinking about it. It's a suppressed memory. It's something that you're not going to forget. leads back to what we call the post-traumatic slave disorder. It's that pain, that sense of pain versus pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we really have to talk about these things because we don't understand what it's doing. You think it's just you watching this video or you watching with a group of friends, but that memory stays with you. It stays in your cells, and then you pass it on to your children, just like Latoya said. When a parent of color or a parent of non-color hits a child, it's because of a past action. It's not because of the current event. Right? So it's a multitude of inflicted pain that you're putting on another person to release the stress that you have not dealt with. So that Vargas vein or that Vargas nerve is going on the 10th power now of pain. And it's embedded. It doesn't stop. And then now you're going to pass that on to the next generation. This is big. We need to talk about the post-traumatic stress, the post-traumatic slave disorder, but also the cautionary tale of what are we doing to ourselves.
I've routinely been, my company, True Roots Counseling Services, is we focused and become trauma informed and trauma specific. About years ago, I made that transition. Really because, in the work that I've been doing, I started True Roots back in the mid 90s and always knew that there was like a continuum thread, and it really is trauma. Whether you're talking about abuse or addiction or abandonment or any of the myriad of things that I dealt with children, with youth, with adults, with seniors, it all comes down to the same pot of trauma. And vicarious trauma in particular is what, having had all these years and understanding what the long-standing impact of exposure will do to an individual, I adamantly abstained from watching any of the videos. I've never watched the George Floyd video. I've engaged in conversation and understand what was seen, but to open my own eyes and my own spirit to that vision, I knew wouldn't serve me well. And so I adamant, and every videoed murder since and before, I don't expose myself to the videos because I know the impact. I know the vicarious trauma. I know the cost of watching. And so, particularly as a therapist, and maybe this will sort of be our three-way into talking about self-care. As a therapist, I'm very cautious about the things I actually watch and listen to. Really because you can't unring a bell. You can't, push the toothpaste back into the tube. Once you're exposed, you're exposed. And because my primary job is to hold space and bear witness to people's trauma, I need to, in my own personal space, minimize the trauma I expose myself to. Otherwise, burnout is definite and it's imminent. And so that's one of the things that I do to care for myself, is watching quite closely the things that I take in. Do you guys have any strategies or tools that you utilize to care for yourself as a therapist? I'm going to come off shared screen. There we go.
Well, with myself, like I said, I teach my clients, and I also use myself, the mindfulness techniques and the deep breathing. I've also now incorporated, because I'm seeing a lot of families and also seniors that have generational or decades of trauma. So I've applied tapping, which is a tool of releasing stress points within the body. So doing the deep breathing and going to those areas that hurt, where they've been saying, well, you know, I've had this pain for so long, Tracy, it's not gonna go nowhere. And you're just really trying to talk to them and say, let's try taking in the breathing, okay? And when we're thinking about that breathing or focal point, how about we also imply a sense of touch or a sense of understanding to that? And going back to my days of child therapeutics, but then putting that healing capacity of the mindfulness into it, right? So the ETF and the effective format of touch, and making sure that those points are releasing the embedded stress within the cells as much as we can. I know one session is not going to take away decades of stress and trauma, but at least if you feel that weight coming off, you'll realize what I'm pointing out to you is how are you walking around with several bags when you should only be holding one? And that's big. And we really need to talk about that and address that, because that's what we're dealing with as a community. Even the response. I did my master's in the States. So it was very interesting when they would hear me speak and I don't sound like my American counterparts. And then my professor started naming me Canadian. And then I felt like, can I really fit that title? Because even in my own country, I'm not really seen as Canadian, right? So that's big. So over there, because I'm more assimilated to, I guess, American culture, I'm Canadian and I have that sense of whiteness or assimilation, but I don't have that same sense of assimilation in my own cultural fabric, where I always have to do that constant proving or working the 5 to 10 times harder, because that's what we do as Black professionals. That's the way we're seen. We're only good as our last experience. And these are the things that we have to talk about, okay? Especially when we're dealing in frontline capacity. And I also feel, I don't know about you, Kimberly, I don't know about you, Latonya, but I'm also seeing other healthcare professionals that have burned out because they don't have any sense of therapeutics or any sense of healing or a way to diffuse themselves from the constant exposure to stress and embedded trauma. So these things are very interesting too, right? And the fact that they don't know that a lot of times, hey, it's not a heart attack you're feeling, it's a panic attack. How do you assess that? How do you deal with that? These things are big.
Absolutely. Your response, Ms. Latonya?
Well, breaking the cycle of do as I say, not as I do within myself. I have a therapist, not letting her go as long as I'm in this field. So that's the main thing, because I need a space to take the cape off too, right? To let my burdens down as well. So she definitely holds me accountable. She won't allow me to therapize myself, if that's a word. But you know what I'm talking about. Like, I already know what to do, so let me just talk, and whatever the case may be. But no, she does. She definitely challenges me and holds me accountable. And she's a Black woman, and I needed that, because for my healing journey, and everybody else's healing journey is different. My healing journey, I didn't want to have to explain myself, because I felt like I had to explain myself my whole entire life. And I'm tired, and that's the space I don't want to have to educate you, right? So, and everybody's space is different. Not saying that, other people can't have a therapist from a different background, because that also can grant healing depending on where you are. Like, I wouldn't tell a male therapist to not see rape victims. You see what I'm saying? Because they may need to hear from the oppressor that was wrong. And that can grant a space of healing for somebody. And it just depends on who you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I also will tell them, like, if your therapist says, I don't see color, walk out. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because no, that's not what you need, because that is to take away from your whole, like, part of your existence. I also have not watched the George Floyd video. I have not watched the Ahmaud Arbery video. I haven't, we can't see the Breonna Taylor video. But yeah, I feel like there might be a numbness there that I feel like it's a part of strategy. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but from my own experience, I remember going to a PWI, private white institution, for my master's in counseling psychology. And I remember it was around the time where Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, right? And there were protests during the time, and it was downtown LA. Also around that time was the Pulse nightclub shooting, right?
Oh wow, yes.
So it was around the same exact time. And the university I was going to is also a Catholic university. So they sent out prayers, and I seen them also when Trump got elected. They sent out prayers, and if you need immigration services, we got you. But when it came to these shootings, dead silence, right? We also had like a mental health forum with the LAPD, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna go to this mental health forum and I'm gonna get some healing. They talked about immigration, and if your child has autism, like, can we have bracelets? They didn't bring up, and it was led by 2 Black professors. They didn't bring up nothing about police brutality whatsoever. So, I had to call my professor to the floor, and I'm just like, okay, I'm thinking, like, I'm finally going to get heard. But the whole university is in this sense of, I feel like we should all just be used to it, right? Yeah. So I'm just like, okay, if I have a rape victim that's been raped from the 3rd time, should I tell her or him, you should just be used to it? Why does this still hurt you? Right? I shouldn't. So, I had to speak up. And the fact that I remember having a presentation around that time, and I'm walking to the campus because I was in walking distance, and I could barely pull myself together. And the reason why I could barely hold myself together, because I'm getting ready to go to a class where I have to hold back my tears so I don't make my white counterparts, my Hispanic counterparts uncomfortable. That's right. Right? And nobody's going to notice. And I had one white friend at the end of my presentation ask me, was I okay? And the fact that I'm just like, okay, I'm trying to not make you uncomfortable when I don't even feel comfortable in my own skin right now. Yeah. What is that saying? Yeah. So I'm just like, we have to, the thing is, we have to normalize, all of us, even as healers, because a lot of us are natural born healers, right? It's already in our DNA to do that, especially as Black women. Oh my gosh. Take care of everybody and don't take care of yourself. That's why we got, breast cancer, high blood pressure, all that, right? Because it has to go somewhere, like we've been saying this whole entire time. But I think it's so important that we even normalize saying this hurts and I can't. Right? Because remember they used to say, don't say you don't know. Let's say you can't, right? Especially with us. Let me give you something to cry about. What you cry, fix your face. You see what I'm saying? Like, from a young age, and it travels on to adulthood, to not only are we treating each other like that, but we taught the world to ignore our pain. You see what I'm saying? And how dare you act out? Now you angry. But like, why is that a dig to me? Why is that an insult? No, I have a right to be angry because you have provoked me. Yeah. Right? So normalizing that is part of my healing. When I normalize it in me and say, I'm not going to be hurt anymore. And when you hurt me, I'm going to let you know that you hurt me, and I'm not about to apologize for it. Right? That was extremely helpful for me, because I found my voice at that PWI. After I noticed the silence, they couldn't tell me nothing anymore. And I remember we had, I don't know if you guys had this in your program, group therapy. We had group therapy, but people weren't actually utilizing it as group. Like, I'm like, when we in group, I'm not your therapist. I am a member. And that part, some of them couldn't wrap their heads around, because I'm like, no, I'm gonna be real and I'm gonna be honest. And they would try to ask, I'll go off on somebody, and they'll try to ask me, well, what if she's your client? Pause. She's not my client. We in group right now. Okay. So normalizing our own emotions, normalizing my emotions, and telling myself I have a right to feel pain, and I also have a right to seek help and to seek healing, has been helpful for me.
Excellent. It's true. They and when I say they, I mean an entire system really feeds on our silence and insists upon our silence. And we're so, from birth, intergenerationally trained to understand and alleviate the distress of white people. And we rise to that occasion at the expense of our comfort, at the expense of our own, even beyond comfort, at the expense of our own health. We rise to the occasion to ensure that we minimize discomfort in our oppressor. And it's something that I've noted over the last little while in myself, and in my response really to the George Floyd, and when I call on George Floyd, I don't do that in denial of the multitude of others who hold that space, but that date was pivotal in our current history, because that was the moment in which the world responded, not just the specific community where the individual was shot or killed or what have you, but literally the world stood up and said, wait a minute, what is this in this land of plenty? Like, what is happening over there? And when that happens, for me, it like unlocked my time. I became intrinsically aware of the fact that I spent all of my time minimizing and alleviating the discomfort of the white people who were around me. And there were many. And whether it be directors or CEOs or the corporate heads and leads of various organizations at various tables that I sit at, and they, oh, what's happening, and asking me questions about the Black community, because of course, I speak for everything. And ordinarily, I would rise to that occasion to alleviate the discomfort. But this time, I'm like, no, y'all need to sit in your discomfort. What you're feeling, it's good. I'm glad you're uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable. You are experiencing and feeling what we have experienced and felt our whole life. This outrage, and you're like, I can't believe this man would kneel on the, we've been saying that. our whole lives. Our whole lives.
Yeah.
That moment in which you become aware of an injustice is what we have been talking about forever. It's what you spent the last 4 years arguing about with Colin Kaepernick.
Yep.
This is that. So be uncomfortable.
But the thing is that the thing that we're forgetting from the narrative is the outcry or the pain would have never been heard unless it was based in a pandemic. And
yes.
you have to understand what's going on, okay? So the only reason why I Can't Breathe was heard is because everybody now knows the feeling of what it is not to breathe properly.
Yes.
And that is big.
Yeah.
So let's put it back 2 decades before George Floyd and let's look at Rodney King. It's the same thing. It was a systemic oppression felt by all. Okay. And the fact that there were unequal rights for Hispanics and both Blacks, and they were living in those communities and they were not being heard. And then the ripple effects were felt in other demographics that felt the same oppression. And that's the thing. But now we're seeing a global oppression of people who have not been heard, people of color who want to be heard. But the cry was heard because it was common. It was felt by all. It held at somebody's heartstrings, and they felt the fact that, hey, I know what it is when I have on this mask. Imagine this man lying on the ground, the cold concrete for 8 and subject minutes and not being able to breathe while this man glorified the fact that he had power over. These are the things that we need to talk about as a community. These are the things that we need to hold up and say, this is not right. Yes, we're expected because we fit the assimilation, okay, of this is the good Black person, so let's talk to them. They're not in trouble. They know us. And they'll talk to us on a level where we can take a little snapshot of what they're going through, but we don't have to take it all in. And I said, no, all of my friends who know me on a personal level knows, if you don't want to talk to me, don't come to me, because all I have to give you is the truth. I'm going to give you the truth. It's raw, it's cut, and you're going to digest it because that's what I deal with. I don't have time to sugarcoat it.
That's exactly true. And I'm like, the details is what we need when we tell these stories. And I forgot one major one when I was telling you guys about my experience going for my counseling degree. My professors were all therapists. Nobody thought to ask me, was I okay? So that, like, that, we just, it's so normalized. Right? And we have to, even ourselves, like, be willing to do what we're asking our clients to do. Right? Is to bring this stuff to the forefront and figure out how to heal our community. But first we got to heal ourselves.
Excellent. Ladies, thank you so much for this conversation today. This was really beautiful. I'm just going to do a quick go round. Is there anything that you feel you haven't shared that you'd want to share? So any last comments that you want to share? We'll start with you, Latonya.
I want to say that the only way to change is through education. I think we need more empathy for ourselves. As Black people, we got to do things differently than what was taught to us, and be able to, like we said in the beginning, like, tell truths to those lies that we've been told, and not try to beat somebody figuratively and, actually into submission and into thinking our way
Yeah.
Just because our experience may be different doesn't mean we can't be empathetic towards all of our different experiences. And you have to ask yourself, like I tell my clients all the time when they want some type of revolve is, do you want to be right or do you want peace?
Yeah.
Right? Like we got to get away from this elitism that we have. This, I know we like the Black excellence. Okay, wonderful. But I also think that in itself is divisive.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay to understand. If you understand why that Dylan Roof had mental illness, why he went up and shot up all the Black people in their church, why can't you understand the mental illness within the Crips and the Bloods?
Yeah.
Right? And why they go to that lifestyle. If you can understand, that, all right, this woman decided to be a doctor. Okay, you should understand why this young lady decided to be a police officer or even a stripper.
Yeah.
Like, karma leads to everything.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And you show up. You show up as human at the end of the day, and that's what we need to give back. What we need to give back to. And I'm hoping to have a conversation in the future about Black women and our hardness on each other.
Yes. Yes.
So that's what I'll leave it with.
Excellent. And Tracy, your comment before we close out?
I just want to say that I know today we centralized around youth. We did touch the other demographics in life, but I want us to all know and accept as Black therapists that it's important that we look at 0 to 100 or beyond 100 and know that generational trauma is real. And the fact that we do need to talk about it, and education is a vital part. But the thing is that I know, Kimberly, because you've been in the field both longer than myself and Latoya, is that it's very hard at times to see another person of color lift another person up. And especially if we're trying to promote Black excellence doesn't come on a linear level.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to help the others that are trying to get up there with you.
Yeah.
And open up doors for them.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we may see, like Latoya said, she had all Black professors and instructors, but who was giving her that hand up?
Yeah.
And I think that is very vital.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And a lot of times it's not us that are in these HR committees or panels that are hiring, so they don't know the demographics of what you should be looking for.
Yeah.
But I would say what you should be looking for is somebody who's going to be able to hear that vibrational pain, hear that current that needs to be there. Who's that voice? Who is that person who's going to open us up to that lines of truth that we're missing?
Yeah.
And I understand that it's hard to do that at times, but if you as Black professionals and you are in a position of power and you see others getting up there, you should be trying to open doors to allow others to get in, to have their experiences mentioned. Because we all need to heal from each other, but the more that we subject ourselves is an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very true. That's a big part of why Black Therapist Speaks. For me, I have been doing this for a very long time, and I find that I grow when I hear and engage with other therapists, other people who are doing this work, but doing it differently than I have, and it enables me to. It enables me to do a number of things. One, if an individual comes along my way who needs help, I've got a roster, so to speak, of people all over who can actually address the issue. And it also gives me a different lens than my own to look through, so that it enables me to identify issues in a way that I would not necessarily have identified them having not had the conversation with somebody who does something a little different than I do. And so I appreciate today, I appreciate the conversations that that we've had, because you've opened my thought and expanded my repertoire, for lack of a better word, of things that I can do with people who come before me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate both of you, and I thank you very much for being here today. A quick question though, in wrapping, where can people find you? And though you will say out loud here, I want everybody watching to know that all their details will be shared in the dialogue or the description box below the video. But if you could share where people can find you and how they can access you, that would be great. Let's go ahead, Tracy. We'll start with you.
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm an affiliate with Kim, so you may find me in the connections to that, but you can also look up Tracy A. Thomas and know that I am also a clinical family therapist as well as a clinical social worker. So I deal primarily with medical issues and also systemic issues and behavioral analysis.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Latonya, where can people find you?
You can find me at liveandbegreat.com. I do have a life coaching business because I just be honest, like I know my community might be more comfortable with that term life coach than they are therapists. So if I have to trick you into healing, I'm going to do it.
Well done.
I see individuals, couples, and families there. I also have a podcast. It's called Live and Be Great. And I also have Instagram. It's called Live and Be Great. So, you know, it's simple to find me there. Yeah. And some Facebook groups as well that are like support groups, healing groups. But if you can find me from the Live and Be Great name, you can find me anywhere. So.
Excellent. When's your podcast?
My podcast is every other Friday. And it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can find a podcast. You can find that one there. And you know, it's education through healing, through my perspective, because I can only speak truth based off of my experience, not to discredit anybody else's experience. I actually don't even have to explain that, but I'm gonna do it. Just in case there's a disclaimer, because I know people take offense when I be like black women this and black men. I know, but it's okay. You'll get over it.
That's right.
Kimberly says, sit in your uncomfortable space. You'll be fine. But yes, every other Friday, I air my podcast on all podcast platforms.
Excellent. Well, ladies, thank you so very much for sharing your wisdoms today on Black Therapists Speak. And know that their contact information, as I said before, will be below. And I look forward to another opportunity at another time for you guys to come back and share. Should you want to or have other things that you want to say. And if, as a viewer, if you're watching and you have a question or a comment or something you would like either Latonya or Tracy to come back and talk about, just leave a comment below or send either one of us a private message, and we will make sure that they're back to speak. On that note, thank you, honestly. Very grateful for you sharing and for what you shared. And that's it for today. Be well. Know that you're very, very well loved and very much appreciated. Bye for now.
Thank you. Farewell.
The Live and Be Great podcast will be airing every other Friday. If you have truly enjoyed this podcast, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving Live and Be Great a chance. Please feel free to share, like, give a review, subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening to right now, on iTunes or Apple Podcast, Spotify, Anchor, as well as Google Play. The Live and Be Great podcast is strictly crowdfunded, so if you are interested in becoming a supporter, you can click the link in the description, or you can go to liveandbegreat.com and scroll to the bottom and donate to the Live and Be Great podcast today, so I can continue to give you good and motivational content. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to give yourself permission to live and be great. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for tuning into my YouTube channel, Live and Be Great. This channel will produce content that is both podcast and on-screen style. So if you're interested and you enjoyed today's show, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you soon.